Hello, happy Earth Day. Welcome to the North Seattle College Art Gallery's virtual visiting artist lecture series. I'm Amanda Knowles, the coordinator of the North Seattle College Art Gallery, and I teach printmaking and drawing in the art department at North. I'm fortunate to work with Claire Aragi, who is my assistant in the art gallery, who is letting folks in today and who did a wonderful job coordinating the show that is in its last week in the NSC Art Gallery, Persist, Movement and Protest Art. I'm also lucky to work with Anne, Mark, and Maddie, the gallery work studies students. We are thrilled to have artist and educator Patte Loper with us today. This is the fifth of our visiting artist lectures for the 2023-2024 school year. If you missed the rest of the lectures that were started in 2020, please go to the NSC Art Gallery YouTube channel to catch the well over 30 lectures that are posted there. We normally start these lectures with a land acknowledgement, but since the beginning of the school year, our institution has not been doing official rote land acknowledgements. Our college leaders are working to sit down with area tribal leaders to discuss a meaningful way to acknowledge and the importance of what it means to be settlers, as well as occupiers, descendants, and inheritors of systems which sought to eradicate the original caretakers of this land. We are nothing without these folk, and we want to build a society where we are thoughtful about how we show that we stand in solidarity with the sovereignty, cultural heritage, and lives of Native, Indigenous, and First Nations peoples. We want to support them in our actions and have these words be meaningful. We want to recognize and acknowledge the labor that created the United States and from which we all benefit. We remember that our nation is built on the labor of enslaved people who were forcibly brought to the U.S. from the African continent, and we recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We acknowledge immigrant labor and recognize that voluntary forced and prison labor contribute to the building and ongoing maintenance of our nation. We acknowledge all unpaid caregiving labor. Additionally, we acknowledge the critical importance of the work towards racial equity that continues across this country in response to racial injustice and generations of structural racism against Black and Indigenous people and other communities of color. I will share my screen. As we go from acknowledgement to deed, we know that it is not enough to just give a hollow acknowledgement and have to be sure that we are taking action. We show you here what actions North Seattle College and the North Seattle College Art Department are taking to support BIPOC individuals and institutions and to be held accountable. We have some really cool things going on campus at the moment. As I hinted at earlier, this is the last week of Persist, an exhibition of protest posters in the NSC Art Gallery. If you visit, you can even print your own protest piece with the provisional press that was loaned to the gallery by Partners in Press for the run of the show. Check out the current write-up of Persist in Real Change. For students, the online application deadline for the 2023-24 Juried Student Art exhibition is due this Thursday at 11:59 p.m. and the work should be dropped off all ready to be installed in the gallery this Friday or next Monday during the hours listed in the application. The link is up on the NSC Art Gallery website for that if you're trying to find it anywhere. This annual show opens on May 13th with an opening on Wednesday, May 15th, 3 to 6 p.m. Please check the North Seattle College Art Gallery's Facebook, Instagram, our website, and flyers around campus to find out what's going on in the gallery and who will be talking and showing and when. We also urge you to visit our website for more information. We will post our links in the chat. We're also going to post Patty's links in the chat at the same time. I want to remind you that the North Seattle College Art Gallery is nothing without support from the college, student leadership, and from all of you who come to these things. Thank you for the help that you have given to the gallery by coming and sharing these events with people that you know who might enjoy them. Keep visiting the gallery, stopping in to say hello, and building the art gallery community. Thank you. Without further ado, I have to introduce you to Paula, who will introduce you to Patty, but I'll introduce you to my colleague, Paula Repson, who will in turn, be introducing today's visiting artist, Patte Loper. Paula is a full-time teacher at North, where she teaches sculpture, 3D design, sometimes 2D design, sometimes art business, sometimes ceramics. She can do it all. She does so much for the art department, co-advising the NSC art group. Keep an eye out for the upcoming art and craft fair. and she is a coordinator of the art department. She is a fabulous artist making sculptures from wood and fabric, site-specific installations, and image-based work surveilling the animal and plant worlds using motion sensor cameras, and so much more. Her work has been shown across the US. She was a Soil Gallery member for a long time and had solo exhibitions there as well as in the Seattle Storefronts program. She's also always introducing me to fabulous artists. Take it away, Paula.
Thank you so very much. And I am really excited to be introducing Patte. I admire Patte's work. And as you can see, there are some threads and connections. So I see you sort of as a mentor, someone I look up to and sort of want to emulate in many ways. So I'm going to do a quick screen share because one of the ways that I was introduced to Patte's work, one of the ways I was introduced was very shortly after I was hired at North Seattle College. Amanda contacted me and said, "Hey, Paula, we got an email from Beth Sellers, who was the curator for Suyama Space." And she said, the artist whose show is coming down soon is wondering if there's an educator who would be interested in these materials for their students. I was kind of new to Seattle. I didn't actually know about Suyama Space. So I went with Amanda and I saw the show and I was like, holy explicit, like this is amazing. And also like, I don't know what we're going to do with these materials, but yeah, let's take it. So when the show closed, Amanda came back with me. We took piles of the work, shoved it in the Jeep. So that's as much as we took as what we could fit in the Jeep. And we just piled it on the tables in sculpture. And I told my students, here are these materials for our first project. And these are intro students, and you have to only use these materials. And so in order to form a foundation around it, I said, you have to do something about control or chaos, but within the confines of a cube. So like a 12 by 12 cube. So this is just an example of some of the work that the students created, again, using materials from this exhibition called Seeking Higher Ground. So this was in 2016, and this was cued me into Patte's work, and I've been following her work ever since. She had an exhibition in 2022 and 23 at the Bellevue Arts Museum. So of course I went and I saw that, and I did go see it in mind with thinking like, I wonder if I can get some of these materials. But the show wasn't as material heavy as the last one, but I was like, well, this is interesting. And then Patte contacted me again and said, hey, do you want some of these materials? And I was like, yeah, I always will just be like, yeah, let's see what we can do. So this time they delivered the material, and it happened to be this sideways Patte, or this sort of like other little world floating. And I was like, oh, I don't know what my students are going to do, but we're going to figure it out. They had to cut it kind of in half to get it into the vehicle to get it there. And what I realized was that there was all these layers hidden inside. And so I started cutting it up. This is a saw that I was like hand sawing these to make little core samples for my students. And so each of my students had to use one of these little core samples of sort of excavating. And then I also included a lot of other materials from the classroom that had been gathered. So these are just a couple little samples of some beautiful little worlds that students made. Again, they had the same prompt, making things with those little core samples. They also took the work outside and were really open to collaboration and site-specific installation, which is a big part of Patte's practice. And what I really loved is how unprecious they became about their work and how willing they were to sort of experiment and have the work fall over and sort of fail and flop. So like here, students were turning things sideways and upside down. The students like really loved the work. They loved the energy present in the materials. So thank you so much, Patte, for continuing to reach out. And these collaborations with my students are great. We have half of the Patte left. So my students this quarter will be working with those. So here's a little bit more formal information about Patte. She has her work shown in numerous solo and group exhibitions, which you can read the list here. She also has her work reviewed in several publications and has participated in many residencies and fellowships, and is just very active in her community and the arts community. So I just really appreciate Patte being here for all that she will be able to give us. And finally, I think it's worth noting that maybe another reason I connect so much with Patte is that she's also an educator, and so is balancing a practice on top of education. So she works as painting faculty, a professor in the School of the Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University, working as a degree program faculty member and a graduate program advisor. And we just found out is in their last week of the quarter, plus some official, probably thesis meetings, I'm assuming. So thank you so much for being here, and I will mute and let you share.
Wow, Paula, thank you. That I think is one of the best introductions I've ever gotten. I'm glad that Patte lives on. I could not be more delighted about that. I just also want to thank Amanda for all of your expert coordination, bi-coastal coordination, and just a huge thank you to each of you who are here. This is a small room. I'm a huge fan of small rooms. I think really important work gets done in small rooms. And so thank you so much for being here and spending this time. That's so meaningful. And yeah, I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff. But before I do that, I think it's really important that we kind of locate ourselves in time and space. And I'm addressing you today from my studio in Queens, New York. And as problematic as land acknowledgements are, understanding that the Lenape were the original people on this land has been really important to my thinking. So I really feel like it's important to mention that. I also want to say that it's really important to acknowledge this moment in history. You know, we're a few years out of the pandemic, and there are several serious wars happening right now across the globe. We are all hearing about the war on Gaza. We are hearing about the war in Ukraine. We're hearing less about the civil war in Sudan and the People's Defensive War in Myanmar. But I want to acknowledge that there may be individuals on this call who are affected by these struggles. I also want to acknowledge that today is Earth Day. As I was telling Amanda and Paula and Claire earlier, I think every day is Earth Day. I also think every day is International Women's Day. I think every month is Black History Month. And so I just sort of want to set the tone of the conversation that way. I'm going to share my screen and we will get underway. I'm going to try to get through this as efficiently as possible. Please feel free to get up and walk around and exercise your bodies while I'm talking. I am an artist who makes research-driven artwork, and today I'm going to talk about a project titled Laboratory for Other Worlds. Paula already mentioned an earlier version of this. It's an ongoing series of exhibitions, and in it, I'm trying to weave together multiple threads in what Ursula K. Le Guin would call a carrier bag of fiction. And that is a narrative without a hero or a straight line spear of a narrative. Rather, it is a container designed to carry things that are useful and that we may need later. It holds, among other things, a new story about a patch of salt marsh, scientific research, the history of New York City, the ocean, and all of us. Laboratory for Other Worlds seeks to connect cultural and scientific knowledges around the climate crisis. And so far, there have been 2 exhibitions with a third one underway. The first 2 exhibitions have already been developed and installed, and the thinking and material explorations in them laid the groundwork for the third and upcoming exhibition. So just to give you a sense of the timing, I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes about the first 2 shows. And then I'd love to pause for a short conversation in which I have some questions for you about how you're receiving this information. It's a really important part of my process to understand how each of you are responding. And so thank you so much in advance, assuming that you want to participate in that conversation. I'll then speak for another 15 minutes or so about my colleague at Tufts University, Dr. Andrew Kemp, who is a climate researcher, about his research process and data. And then we can have more conversation after that. And please forgive me, I will be reading most of this talk to make sure that I don't leave anything out and that I get to the point quickly. So to begin, I'd like to mention that a focus of interest in art and ecological conversations of late has been around the idea of emergent forms. The word emergent has various definitions, including arising unexpectedly, calling for prompt action, rising out of or as if out of a fluid, and rooted in shallow water and having most of its vegetative growth above water. My work is inspired in turn by each of these definitions. Emerging technologies are defined as being technologies whose development, practical applications, or both are still largely unrealized. These technologies are generally new, but also include older technologies finding new applications. Emerging technologies are often perceived as capable of changing the status quo. To paraphrase philosopher, anthropologist, and curator Bruno Latour, political action in response to scientific understanding is impossible without art first sensitizing the public to new knowledge. I'm framing this imperative in relationship to my art practice as an emergent technology. That is, a technology calling for prompt action, perceived as capable of changing the status quo and rooted in shallow water and having most of its vegetative growth above water. I should mention and here we see Patty's Patty in an original form. I should mention that although, as far as I know, not described this way in the past, the idea of art as emergent technology is not new. It has surfaced and resurfaced throughout culture, often in times of social rupture. In the Laboratory for Other Worlds' first iteration, I sought to devise a visual language that could make visible connections between social and ecological realms. In the second iteration, I expanded this process by using research into the environmental humanities as a communicative tool. And the third exhibition is in production mode and builds on this earlier work. This third one, will be specifically designed to raise scientific literacy in the public by utilizing data developed by Andrew Kemp, Tufts Earth and Climate Science faculty, about variable sea level rise. And the research project and exhibition will be installed this summer on Governor's Island as part of the NYU Gallatin School's Wet Lab, which is a living laboratory and teaching gallery located on Governor's Island in New York City. And I'm interested in giving you a window into how I'm trying to reach people, how I'm trying to gain access to audiences for this information. So these exhibitions were created as complex, interconnected environments meant to unsettle visual and, by extension, cultural hierarchies. I deploy science fiction narratives, humor, handmadeness, processes of damage and repair, and widely distributed and multiple forms of technology, as well as the incorporation of scholarly and archival research to render visible an intellectual framework developed by the environmental humanities, which seeks to instigate collective multi-species thriving through ecological, feminist, and anti-colonial scholarship. The first exhibition was installed at the Mattress Factory in May of 2019. The Mattress Factory is a contemporary art museum located in Pittsburgh, and it is a pioneer of site-specific installation art. In 2019, the Mattress Factory hosted more than 58,000 visitors and offered a diverse array of programming with a wide range of community partners. For this exhibition, I wove together painting, sculptural objects, sound, and video. Totemic forms in handmade sculpture and painting were derived from the surrealist process of automatic drawing, meaning they were created without a plan, allowing the subconscious to dictate form. And these totemic forms were visually integrated with wiring related to video and audio technology. Surveillance equipment run from an off-grid solar panel system made the exhibition available to viewers on the street, bypassing the pay-to-view process of the Mattress Factory. And the entire exhibition also served as a video set for a stop-motion animation, which I'm going to play you part of right now. And hopefully it will start playing. Ooh, that's a little loud, so I'm going to try to, oh no, it's not like the sound, so I'm going to just leave it with the sound off. But anyway, the entire exhibition also served as a video for this animation. The Mushroom Cyclops protest sign is a short storytelling video that was shot on the model landscape at the center of the exhibition. It tells a story in which a ruined planetary surface is being observed by unseen but omnipresent scientist entities. The landscape comes to be bathed with rays of dark and light emanating from a mysterious but tender spacecraft. The light awakens the dormant Mushroom Cyclops protest sign, which emerges from the landscape, casts a gleaming eye back at the observers, and begins cycling through messages of collective action, activating the planet's surface with movement and sound. The music was recorded in November 2019 at the Mattress Factory during a live event with my longtime musical collaborator, Andrew Renato, and that is moot because we can't hear it. But actually, now that I'm going to stop talking for a minute and let the sound run. Okay, we'll stop it there and move on. That is available on my Vimeo page if you want to see the full Mushroom Cyclops protest sign. So moving on from the Mattress Factory, initially I thought Laboratory for Other Worlds was a one-off exhibition, but then I found myself continuing this project during pandemic lockdown and realized that the framework of Other Worlds could be used for iterative projects. This new work was inspired by experiences I had at All Faiths Cemetery in Queens, New York. This 19th century cemetery sits on the original land of the Lenape, who resisted colonization for many years before being forced off the land in waves, first by the Dutch and then British colonial settlers. Today, many descendants of the Lenape still consider the New York region their homeland. In its current existence, the graveyard is a sprawling, many-acred, loosely managed, abandoned feeling space that has inadvertently become an urban sanctuary for native plants, insects, and birds, many from communities that have occupied this space since long before humans. There is a marked contrast between the vibrant proliferation of plant and animal life and the silent insistence of the memorials, the oldest of which date back to the founding of the cemetery in the 1800s, and the newest of which mark the recent graves of the many pandemics. My work came to draw on visual motifs from Christian stories inscribed on old gravestones. I'm equally influenced by the rich tangle of underground mycorrhizal networks and human bodies that nourish the plants, insects, and spirits of the cemetery. Time here is strange and seems to turn in on itself, with multiple temporalities happening simultaneously. I became intrigued by the idea of more than human participatory research, meaning research that makes room for the unexpected agency of non-human actors. And while I'm still figuring out exactly how to do this, it has led me to some interesting observations. Here in this video, you see mugwort in the family of Artemisia, growing very densely on an old grave site. Artemisia grows on almost every continent, is a nurse plant, meaning it fixes the soil and helps other species grow. It is medicinal for humans, and a belief in its ability to ward off bad spirits has arisen independently in cultures on every continent that it is found. It also grows prolifically on old graves, almost seeming attracted to them. And based on current research into mycorrhizal networks, Artemisia is quite likely distributing human DNA widely throughout this biosphere. For me, this gives new meaning to the term body territory, a term I encouraged in Sylvia Federici's book, Re-Enchanting the World, Feminism and the Politics of the Commons, meaning the land where one's ancestors are buried is commonly held territory and an extension of the human body. It is these types of knowledges that help me understand the entangled nature of this space and the way the human becomes subsumed into a larger biosemitic realm. So this leads me to the second version of Laboratory for Other Worlds, which Paula, in such a lovely way, spoke about it and was the last stop for Patty's Patty before heading to North Seattle College. But this exhibition grew from this research and was installed at Bellevue, just outside of Seattle, as I'm sure y'all know. And as I'm sure also you know, the museum produces timely and socially relevant exhibitions and programs for over 300,000 people each year. The year my exhibition happened might have been less. It was we were just coming out of the pandemic. And so, we were still a little afraid to be around each other. Laboratory for Other Worlds was installed on the 3rd floor. And one of the things that drew me to the space was that the building's architect, Stephen Knoll, designed this gallery to respond to Gnostic time, a circular calendar related to the ancient growing seasons. And here are a few shots of the exhibition, which spans 2 galleries of the 3rd floor. And here you can see plant and tree communication devices that were installed that were designed to help the human viewers of the work extend into a type of a plant subjectivity. Examples are spatial arrangement detectors that allow humans to use indirect touch to understand how nearby plants are arranged, an attempt at mimicking a plant's haptic experience of touch, and plant paintings that use reflected light to create an aesthetic experience for photosynthetic beings. I also developed a series of 5 by 6 foot psychic corporeal maps of the cemetery for this gallery, 2 of which you can see here on the right, installed behind a plant companion device. I call them psychic because they are psychological visions of the land, and corporeal because they depict the land as a body. And these maps are also about nonlinear time and depict the land in multiple states occurring simultaneously. This psychic corporeal map is actually of Bellevue, Washington, where the exhibition was installed, and it is 7 by 8. And in it, we see Bellevue depicted as a living entity with the museum in the center, surrounded by an underground view of mycorrhizal networks, intertwining, sometimes erotically, with human skeletons. A recurring character in the exhibition is the mycorrhizal network, defined as interlocking networks of plant roots and long strands of fungi that share food and information between plants and trees in the forest and in other areas where there are plants. The second gallery holds a video installation titled Thonos, from the Greek word thonios, meaning of, in, or under the earth and seas. And this is a science fiction piece about what is known as the ecological critical zone, the thin crust above and below the ground that sustains life on Earth. It is a science fiction that looks at the ground and not at the sky. Paula had mentioned an interest in like the materiality of the exhibitions. And so the materials list here is sawhorses, architectural salvage, doll eyeballs, repurposed artwork, found and recycled materials, paper pulp, grow lights, non-fire clay, sticks, video equipment, and several digital videos. So that kind of gives you a sense of all the different kinds of materiality happening. And speaking of which, I just wanted to take a moment to share a little bit about my material process. Here's an example of damage, repair, and reuse. So on the left is sort of the original damaged piece, and on the right is how it gets reused into new work. I often work quickly, intuitively piecing together scraps of found material. And once built, a piece is often exhibited and then allowed to be damaged during deinstallation and shipping, only to be repaired and reconfigured into new work. This older work on the left, as I said, was repurposed into the 3-dimensional mycorrhizal network map seen in the body of a giant snail. This process is highly practical, and I use it to create less waste. I reuse as much of the material as possible, and when the fragile, lightweight sculptures are crushed, they take up less space, are easier to transport, and become very, I think, interesting to look at. And so what we're looking at here, this piece on the right is maybe about 3 feet tall. What material cannot be used is donated, and I think that North Seattle College is just an ideal example of what can happen for exhibition materials to have a future life. So right now, I'm going to play another movie. Okay, so this is the 3-minute video that runs behind the installation, and it tells a story through images and a poem made from quotes by environmental humanities scholars. You will see an abstracted, industrialized landscape grow a giant eye, which cries a tear, that turns into a worm, that calls down into the mycorrhizal network, summoning an earth craft that spills out flourishing tentacles and feelers. The sound is experimental Arduino samples made by one of my students, Yak Sai, who made this while learning how to create sound from light and leaves. And while this video plays, I'm going to speak just very briefly about the environmental humanities. The environmental humanities is a transdisciplinary intellectual movement that combines art, curation, philosophy, science, and technology, and that seeks to challenge the human-centered cultural and intellectual framework inherited from the Enlightenment. It is informed by theories of queer ecology, is essentially feminist, anti-racist, and acknowledges we are one entangled body here on planet Earth. This thinking owes an enormous debt to Indigenous science and culture, and it seeks a creative, loving path out of the thorny problems of the climate and crisis. I have found this framework to be one that sparks hope and action in my students and audiences alike. Watch for the moment. All right, so that is my very DIY video skills on display. And then finally, this is a final slide from the second exhibition. An important but much less visually jazzy feature of the exhibition is the study center, which has lab desks and chairs, an environmental humanities syllabus, native plants with magnifying lamps for viewing, and audience members are invited to come and sit with plants and draw and make notes. And their drawings and notes are then integrated into the exhibition through the study center. So now I'd love to pause for just a moment for conversation. You know, I'm just really I'm curious. I'm wondering, are the ideas of the environmental humanities, are they familiar to you? Are there connections you can draw to your own thinking? And I'm just wondering what do you see in the work? You know, like this is a really smart audience here. And I don't know. I want to understand, like you can help me understand better how this is communicating. And I'm seeing there's some comments in the chat. Well, I'm wondering if anybody has anything and no pressure. You might just want to be quiet. That's totally fine too. But I'm wondering if there's any responses. Can be chat, can be just speak.
I mean, I find lots of connections with environmental humanities, and I was telling you earlier that I'm participating in this Climate Justice Faculty Institute, but I really love the sort of flip with environmental humanities, but they both play a really important role and they're interconnected to one another. A couple of things that I want to recognize that I think is important is that when I saw the show in Bellevue, I saw that you had that syllabus that was connected to it. And I really loved that syllabus because it made me feel like I had a way into the work even when I'm familiar with some of these things, they're still being presented in a way that's a little bit unfamiliar. So I really appreciated that. And then I later found that it existed online and that you have additional resources online that, you know, I go back to and I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm going to check into this resource or read this book. So that was really something I appreciated. And at the beginning of your talk, I really liked how you were talking about various kinds of technologies and how art sensitizes the public to new knowledge. So I think that that is also something that's really important to just remind myself, but also to maybe like remind students, like, what are we doing and why are we doing what we're doing? And where can we have an impact as well, maybe? And, you know, I think that that plays a really viable role, the way that we're trying to question and be curious about and maybe present areas where we think things are problematic or where they can be helpful as well. So yeah, I think those are just a few of the things that stood out so far.
Oh, Paula. Thank you especially for that feedback about the syllabus, because knowing that that's helpful is so great. Because yeah, I think that's one of the really coolest aspects of the study center, and the idea actually came from Lane Eagles, who was the curator of the exhibition. She, you know, she was like, "Can this be a syllabus? Can we make this into like a pedagogical tool?" And yeah, I feel like this conversation about like art's purpose is coming up a lot for people right now. I feel like, you know, a lot of people are becoming very disillusioned by like the art world in terms of like maybe the more commercial or capitalist aspects of it. And I feel like the power of art gets diluted by kind of the art world being this special thing that's really related to like status. And, I think we all need to be creative and need to be artists, and the more artists, the better. And that's not the message that we get a lot of the time in our larger culture. But this creativity is the way out, material, intellectual, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think even if we're not all artists, that we learn to be appreciative of art as well, right? So we can't all be makers, but if we can give people access points to reaching new ways of thinking and interacting with work, then that also is supportive and supports all of us in our endeavors.
100%. Yeah, very, very well said.
I love, I mean, and it's probably part of environmental humanities, but that you're including the emotional and the community along with these sort of hard science, hard intellectual ideas. Another way to get people in, even if the art is still a ways away from them, then they still have the emotional response. They still have the idea of community and all of that stuff. So that was really beautifully woven through that as well.
Yeah, the emotional, social, community aspect of it. Like, why are we doing art and science if that's not at the heart of everything? If it's not coming from a place of love and like care for the communities that we are involved in. And I extend that to like more than human communities as well. If we're not doing it from that place, then it's just, I think it's going to continue to cause harm, right? Yeah.
We have a note that came through, which is, as a material hoarder and artist, it is astounding to me to see how clean and ordered your studio looks. Is that indicative of your process? I also like that you work fast.
John, thank you so much. There's like a pretty cluttery corner over here where I was shoving things out of the way before this Zoom call. So I'm glad that my smoke and mirrors is working. And thank you for that. I don't know. I don't know if it's indicative of my process. Like I feel kind of messy. Like I feel like my ideas are messy and sprawling. And when I really get going, I've got another mess area over here, but yeah, I do like to keep things orderly though, maybe because my interior is such a disaster zone. So what else?
I was trying to type in the chat and am kind of intrigued about environmental humanities as an interdisciplinary set of studies. And it's new to me. And as somebody who taught interdisciplinary studies for many years, I'm just kind of curious about how long it's been happening and where maybe it's happening and what kinds of courses are coming out of that department or that idea in academia.
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's fairly new, and there's a few different branches of it. The branch that I'm particularly interested in, which like really aligns itself with justice, anti-racist, also pulls a lot from and owes a debt to indigenous thinking. That branch was really, I think, started by Deborah Rose Bird, who is if you know her, she started out as an Australian ethnographer and anthropologist. And she embedded with First Nations people in Australia and was a really great student of the sciences and cultures in this community, which has remained unbroken, by the way, for 75,000 years. So there's just like an enormous amount of wisdom there. And that hadn't been translated to the European culture that was kind of had all the material resources and was kind of colonized and is colonizing the space. Her writings that are basically a conversation with this knowledge, this like like much needed knowledge, forms the basis for this. And I'll also add that at the Venice Biennale, the Australian artist won for the first time. His last name is Moore, and he's a First Nations Australian artist who has traced his personal family lineage back 35,000 years. And the piece that he's exhibiting is a family tree drawn in chalk on a wall. And it's massive. There's, thousands and thousands of names. And where it's coming out now, I know at Tufts University, there are lots of collaborations between School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Environmental Studies, Biology, and Visual and Material Studies. We have done an Environmental Humanities Symposium. We are integrating a lot of the learning from the symposium into our courses. So it's starting to, get out there, but it's still relatively unknown, which is one of the reasons why I introduce it every chance I get. I'm like, this thing is happening. It's really cool. It's art and science and philosophy. And, these are the kinds of like transdisciplinary conversations that are really needed, because I'm sorry, if we're just having conversations about science, it's not getting anywhere. Plus, science is often not asking the right questions. It's not holding the right values. It's not holding the most helpful values. And often, I think, because it's aligned with extractive practices. And so, how do we kind of integrate with science to ask better questions? And I think this is a larger movement, but we really need to kickstart it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really interesting. I'll look into it more, because clearly it also aligns and draws from gender studies and critical race studies and queer studies. And I liked how you talked about all that too. Yeah. And indigenous studies.
100%. It's all connected. Like, you can't separate it out. And I feel like that's been another weakness in the environmental movement, is trying to separate environmental issues from social issues. It's all the same. It's all part of the same extractive capitalist process. So, looking at it at its root is really important, and recognizing that. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that forward. Okay. Archie Moore. Thank you. Thank you, Leah. Thank you. My dear friend, Leah Modigliani, is on the call. I'm so delighted to see you here. Leah also works like deeply and along a lot of the same lines that I do. And so, Leah, I'm super honored that you're here. But yeah, thank you for pulling that name out. I was like, oh no, I don't have the name. Okay, so maybe we're really getting low on time, because this talk ends at 4. I might just show a few more slides really, really quickly. And then I'll take 2 minutes to do that. And then we can have our final conversation. So I will share screen again. So moving through really quickly. So my colleague's scientific data is about variable sea level rise. And obviously, sea level rise is something that we're deeply, deeply concerned about. And it will impact not just human communities, but more than human communities in ways that we don't fully understand yet. And so what Andy's work is doing is getting really specific about how things are going to change in specific areas. And so to do this, he basically needs salt marshes that have remained undisturbed for at least 2,000 years. And he goes out into these salt marshes. He does this all across the world. These just happen to be at the Belle Isle Salt Marsh, which is right near Tufts University. And this is Andy and I out in the marsh getting sedimentary core samples. Paul, it was so funny that you mentioned Patty's Patty seems to be sedimentary core samples, because this research is all based on looking deep into the ground. And basically, once you get the core samples, you identify these tiny fossils called foraminifera of these little sea creatures that different species live in different places along the shore. So some live underwater, some live in the interstitial space between the water and the sea, and then some live higher up on land. And so by taking these core samples and radiocarbon dating them, and then counting the foraminifera by correlating these tiny fossils, these tiny microscopic creatures in time and space, you can figure out where ancient sea levels were in any given place. And this helps us understand what we might be looking at in the future. So the show that I'm working on right now is the next version of Laboratory for Other Worlds. It's going to be on Governor's Island, which is a tiny island in New York Harbor, right off of the southern tip of Manhattan. And what I want to do is as I'm thinking about a salt marsh on Governor's Island, there are no salt marshes on Governor's Island because it was a really thriving ecosystem. While it was being managed by the Lenape, the Europeans came and cut down, the Dutch specifically, which are, my ancestors, came and cut down all the trees. The island began eroding. They lost the salt marshes. And so now it's, if you can see on the right, you can kind of see from the map that the edges are very sharp. There's like a sharp concrete barrier. However, this spot on the map is where the salt marshes once were. Rather than thinking about recreating a past salt marsh, I'm trying to think about what a future salt marsh might look like on Governor's Island once we have developed a more equitable relationship with the land. And so I'm really interested in the way this salt marsh in Pelham Bay Park, which is north of Governor's Island in the Bronx, but is still an intact salt marsh system, and also novel ecosystem, because all kinds of new plants have been introduced. There's lots of plastic in this environment, yet it's still thriving. And so I'm taking that as an idea for like a future salt marsh as a departure point for this third iteration of Laboratory for Other Worlds. So I'm looking at multiple entry points into science. And what I'm thinking about is, as always, using aesthetics, using the concept of the post-human imagination, embodied knowledge, traditional knowledge, and queer ecology. So I'm thinking about like microscopic universes. So the post-human imagination is activated by considering how microscopic organisms might view their environment and each other. And by post-human, I mean thinking about a time in the future in culture where maybe we're not centering ourselves and those like us, but understand that all species, all other humans, even the land and the water are also like really important aspects of our world that need to be protected in the same way that our own bodies are protected. I'm also really realizing that because I'm wanting to bring these multiple entry points in, that it can't just be me as the artist and my singular. So I'm just so honored to be able to enter into collaboration with my colleague Tanya Crane, whose work is really about embodied knowledge. So Tanya is a radical jewelry maker and sculptor whose work utilizes materiality to consider how environmental impacts affect the body and communities. And Tanya is creating wearable sculpture that will be part of this exhibition study center. Also incredibly honored to be in collaboration with Erin Genia. Erin is a member of the Dakota, and it will be performing her performance Earthling, Earthling is sort of like a witness character, and she will be using special stone shavings that are actually pipestone that are part of the Dakota origin story. It's an incredibly valuable material that is actually thought to be the original body of the original people of the Dakota who were washed away in a flood. So there's all kinds of intersections. Erin and I have also decided that we're going to be in conversation throughout the entire development of the exhibition so that Erin's ideas and thoughts can be central to the entire exhibition. I'm also thinking about maps and reliquaries. So totemic imagery in art often feels rooted in ancient culture, depicting human-like forms suggestive of kinship and ritual. I'm getting to this through my automatic drawing and building techniques. I'm working on this giant map. It's 12 feet by 6 feet. That is sort of investigating this hypothetical future salt marsh through the eyes of like microscopic creatures. And I'm also working with reliquaries. So reliquaries are Catholic grief objects, and they hold the remains of people deemed extremely sacred by the Catholic Church. I do just want to read one little thing that I wrote about the reliquaries. In that, historic European Christian practices led to what is commonly referred to as the Enlightenment, enabling the onset of extractive practices that have led to the mess we're in. As a lapsed Catholic, I am thrilled at this grisly evidence of animacy and materiality in my own seemingly banal childhood religion. I feel this haunting reliquary holding the jawbone of St. Anthony of Padua contains a high degree of empathic and material vibrancy that may point to other cultural possibilities that have been repressed and can be reactivated. So I think that's a perfect moment to end the talk on, and we have 2 minutes for questions. Let's see. Oh, that's great. Thank you for these really generous comments. Yeah, I'm wondering what in the last few minutes, what else? I'm curious how the bringing in of the Christian reliquaries into the conversation. This came out through Erin and my conversation. Erin also has Irish Catholic heritage, as well as being someone from Dakota heritage. And so we found this moment of like, intersection that I thought was really important. And we decided that kind of seeing the science as sacred, or bringing a sacredness into science, and especially like the site of science, like where the science, where like what parts of land are research site, to be an important idea.
I was gonna say, I think I mean the oh, I just lost the word. The reliquary. What is it called? The jockey.
Reliquary, yeah, reliquary, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways too, like it's like this weird connection between the past and the present, or sort of the future, right? Because they were thinking about the future as they were like preserving and framing, and it was like for future generations to see. And so I think there is an interesting connection there. That's
Yeah, and what goes in the reliquary are actually pieces of sedimentary core samples. So it's like that earth is like instead of the body part. That was a really important piece of it that I probably should have mentioned. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ling's class. Thank you for coming.
That's our ceramic studio.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, it's 4 o'clock. Maybe we should call it a day.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about this really interesting place that now we all kind of want to go and figure out a little bit more. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.